our film review and get some film recommendations with our film reviewer, James Luxford, our movie critic from Stratford upon Avon. Very good morning to you, James.
Good morning.
Now, I just mentioned there about football, James, because I know you live in Stratford upon Avon. I also know you're a big football fan. Have you got one eye on potentially going to watch Stratford Town in the Cup next week?
I do indeed. Yes, it's just I've been a few times. I always enjoy the pre-season friendlies at Stratford Town. I catch the odd league game as well. It's just a really lovely place to go and watch football, and I'm glad to see that the team's getting so much focus.
I know they're going to be on
And I suppose
telly.
that is yes, and I suppose that is the to use the cliche, the magic of the cup, really, isn't it?
It is, and I saw as well, they tweeted they've got the match ball as well, which has been delivered by the FA. So big times ahead for Stratford Town. Right, it's time to get your movie recommendations, James, with the good, the bad, and the on demand. So let's start with the good first. Where are we going?
The good for me is The French Dispatch in cinemas now. It's the new film from Wes Anderson, who you may remember made The Royal Tenenbaums and Fantastic Mr. Fox. It's a trilogy of stories surrounding an American magazine based in France.
Arthur Howitzer Jr. transformed the series of travelogue columns into the French Dispatch, a factual weekly report on the subjects of world politics, the arts, high and low, and diverse stories of human interest.
You don't think it's almost too seedy this time?
No, I
For
don't.
decent people.
It's supposed to be charming.
Now, when we think of Wes Anderson picks, I always think of the slick production skills, and that doesn't sound. This sounds like it's very much of that ilk, James.
Yes, and I really enjoyed this. As you say, if you know Wes Anderson or have seen his films like, The Grand Budapest Hotel from a few years ago, you'll
Great
know
film.
what to expect. Yeah, it's a very stylish, very funny film with a huge cast, including his regular collaborators, Bill Murray, Tilda Swinton, Timothy Chalamet, who we were just saying is everywhere at the moment with Dune and a lot of other things, and a lot more people as well, as you heard in the trailer. It's kind of a love letter to journalism, and as the different stories play out, I think that affection really comes across. I really enjoyed it.
Well, now you said that Bill Murray's in it, I might cock an ear to it because anything with Bill Murray, and certainly he's one of those films that whenever I see Bill Murray on the list, I always think I might watch that film. So that is your good, bad. Good, James. What is your bad you've got for us this morning?
My bad is Last Night in Soho in cinemas Friday. It's a horror movie about a London student who has flashbacks to the 60s following a lounge singer trying to make it in Soho.
Do you believe in ghosts? I want to report a murder.
You witnessed the murder last night, but you believe this was a vision from the past.
The guy that killed her is still out there. I have to stop him.
And now on paper, James, this sounds like something that would appeal to me. It's sort of got that sort of Whitechapel, sort of Jack the Ripper feel to it, that sort of, Sherlock Holmes-esque type thing of sort of London in the 60s. But for you, it's wide of the mark.
Yeah, and I was disappointed because this is made by Edgar Wright, who made Baby Driver, Hot Fuzz, Shaun of the Dead, things like that. I think bad might be a bit harsh from me, but it's definitely should have been better than it was. It's, as you say, it's an intriguing concept, and it takes in if you're familiar with Soho, all the sights and sounds of the place. The thing is, the sequences shot in the 60s are great, but we spend most of our time in the present, which isn't as fascinating, and there are characters who aren't particularly interesting. Having said that, there are some good performances, particularly Anya Taylor-Joy, who you may remember from The Queen's Gambit as the singer in question. And one final bow for Diana Rigg, who in her last film, she plays a mysterious landlady in the movie, and I think it's a it it might not have been all it could have been, but I think for this actor in particular, it's a wonderful way to bow out.
And as well, when you talk about those iconic images of Soho in the 60s, I always think about the movie Get Carter, James, and one of my favourite films. But that really captures London in the 60s as it was, doesn't it, that film? You can't beat when
Yes,
it actually was made.
yes, it's just I think there's a feel and an energy to British movies, particularly in the 60s. There was such a vibrancy about the films being made, and this captures that to an extent in those flashback sequences. But for me, the issue is not in the past; it's in the story told in the present.
In the present. Well, we're going to go to your on-demand pick next, and this is one of the true stories which Tom Hanks has played, which is Sully.
Yes, it's on demand on iPlayer now. Tom Hanks stars in the film about the miracle on the Hudson, where pilot Chesley Sullenberger saved 155 lives by landing in the Hudson River, but was still investigated by the authorities.
No one warned us. No one said you were going to lose both engines at a lower altitude than any jet in history. This was dual engine loss at 2,800 feet, followed by an immediate water landing with 155 souls on board. No one has ever trained for an incident like that.
He picks his roles very well, Tom Hanks, when these opportunities come up to play these sort of true life story action roles. I'm thinking of things like Captain Phillips. That was a great film. I was surprised at the movie Sully, James, when I watched it, and not least for the fact that you raised there, if it's a factual account, how much he was challenged at the time, because on the face of it, we saw him as a hero, didn't we?
Yes, and I think there's a duality to that. Tom Hanks does a really good job of portraying Sully as an ordinary man who perhaps doesn't want the attention that his heroics have brought him, but at the same time doesn't understand why certain authorities are questioning what he might have done, what could have been done in that moment. And yeah, it's interesting. I think it's a very modern kind of exploration of heroism where of course there's the adulation and the gratitude from the media, but also some people who are picking holes in a story and have skepticism. And so I think in that sense it's a very layered story, and of course Tom Hanks is absolutely brilliant in it. Uh, I think he's a really good storyteller in terms of bringing modern history to life, as you said, Captain Phillips there, and as a kind of media uh, icon in the recent movie "Won't You Be My Neighbor," where he played Fred Rogers, the children's TV presenter who was so influential to a generation. So this kind of uh, this sort of third act to his career where he tells the history of contemporary America is very fascinating, and Sully is a part of that.
And James, when you always come on, and when I stand in for Phil, I always like to share with something back with you the way. You probably realise that, because you give us such great recommendations of things to watch, and Sully is definitely one that I'll probably put on there. I just wanted to share with you. One of my things I love to do is to go around charity shops, James, and I was in the Acorn Hospice shop in Cannon Park last week, and I managed to pick up the Alfred Hitchcock Best of box set for £3, James, which I've been watching all this week. And I've got to say, Strangers on a Train, the Alfred Hitchcock movie, is one of the best storyline scripts and production for a black and white movie I think I've ever seen.
Firstly, that's a wonderful price for all those movies, and I think I love a bit of Alfred Hitchcock. I would recommend anyone who wants to learn more about classic cinema or British cinema, indeed, to go through his old movies. Strangers on the Train is one of the very great movies to come out of this country, I think.
And producer Jenna, just said to me, Rear Window. I watched that the other day as well. What an amazing film set in a flat with a guy who's in a plaster, and the way the screen just pans around people's daily life from that back window, and the storyline built from a flat. An incredible way that Hitchcock does it.
And I think, it's one of my, I suppose one of my rants as a film fan is that like great director will always kind of put limitations on themselves. And I think that Rear Window is a really fine example of that, of putting so much action and so much intrigue into 1, 2, 3 places. You really don't go an awful lot of places physically in that movie, but narratively,
Takes you
you seem
everywhere.
to be everywhere. Yeah.
James, great to talk to you. Some fantastic recommendations, James Luxford, as well, on our film review. So, The Good, The French Dispatch, the Wes Anderson comedy, that's in cinemas now. James also highlighted Last Night in Soho, if you want to catch that. It's a thriller in cinemas Friday. And on demand, James's pick, Sully, which is the biopic starring Tom Hanks about the pilot Sully who landed the plane on the Hudson River, if you remember, in New York.
Weekday morning.